Welcome to the show, All Things Writing. I am your host, Brian the Writer. Let me take you on a journey through my writing life and introduce you to some of the amazing talent that exists in the writing world. Whether you are looking for a little advice or just to catch an interesting interview, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All Things Writing starts now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to All Things Writing. I am your host, Brian the Writer. Let me tell you, one of my favorite things in the world, the thing that makes me happier than many other things, is when people are repeats on the show. I love that. It makes me so happy because here's the thing. People don't have to come back. They don't really have to. And when they come to me and say, "Hey, been a while since we talked," and I went, "Hey, let's do a recording session. Why not? A little recording sesh. Find out what's going on, and maybe have a nice chat about what's new in their writing life and the ways people write, the way people think about it. We as writers are not, it's not like we went to some school and we learned this is how you write, and you follow these steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. No, not at all. As a matter of fact, my own personal, the way I approach writing has changed dramatically from my very first book that I ever put out to now. My process has changed dramatically. The ways in which I look at my phraseology, and here's an example for you. I used to use the word "it" a lot more until one of my editors turned around and said, every time you use the word "it," you should seriously sit down and think about what does it represent. So let's say a character is in a situation where they're investigating a murder and they see a cheeseburger wrapper in the garbage, and later on I said, and then he thought about it for a while. He or she. Well, wait a minute. Okay, while that's a perfectly good sentence, we don't necessarily need it. What we need to do is turn around and say, okay, you could say something like, the cheeseburger wrapper in the garbage stuck in his mind, and it gnawed at his psyche, not giving him a moment of peace, or her, or whatever. We took it and turned it into the cheeseburger wrapper. What we're doing is we're providing more context, more depth to that conversation, and it just makes for better reading overall. Another thing I've done is, these little nitnoid words that I always look for when I go through and do my review process, that list just gets longer and longer and longer and longer. But that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We learn to be better editors internally when we go along. Anyway, totally not the point of this week's show, but I thought I would bring it up. And actually, the reason we started down this road in the first place is my next guest is the guest some of you will remember from an earlier interview we did. Caroline Ailanthus is with me again. She's a wonderful writer, and I'm just tickled pink that I could get her scheduled to the show. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Caroline.
Good, glad to be here.
As I love to say, I'm always glad that people come and join me on the show. Otherwise, I'd just be talking to myself, and I do that enough as it is anyway. So you're a return guest, and I love return guests because they're always fun. I mean, it means I must not have done too bad of a job the first time around. But who knows? Maybe I did, and you're just coming back to see if I truly am that bad. We don't know for sure. But when have you been? What have you been? Well, tell people who maybe have not seen your work or seen the other recording. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I always get sort of awkward about that question because I feel like I'm supposed to say, well, I like long walks on the beach,
Long
which I
walks on
do.
the beach, men who don't cry, Labrador retrievers, and Libras. I don't know.
Beagles in my case.
Oh,
And crying.
beagles.
Yeah, I have two beagle mixes and
Yes.
three cats, one of whom is a kitten who I hope he's not busy destroying all my potted plants while I'm away for overnight. But
That is
he's
the risk with cats.
he's 5 months old, and he's just he is a wonderful, lovable, holy terror. Is what he is. He just
So,
destroys things.
completely side story here. My terrier, I walk almost every morning, and she is just like any terrier, the most stubborn animal on planet Earth. Well, as I'm walking her, she'll stop and she'll refuse to move anymore. So, what I've done now is when she does that, I just let go of her leash and keep walking. And she'll run up to me, get in front of me with her leash, and stop there and stare at me like, "The hell are you doing? That's not how this works." It's awesome. Yeah.
That's cool. So yeah, I'm a novelist. I'm a blogger. I'm a editor. I like to cook. Lots of things, but I've been on here before talking about my books. I forget which one. I have 4 out now,
Mm-hmm.
and I forget which one I've interviewed with before.
Mm-hmm.
But my first 3 books all completely defy genre. I didn't think about genre when I wrote them. I just wrote what
Sure.
I was interested in, and it was like, great, how am I going to
Yeah.
market this thing? Uh, and they are all very much rooted in science, not science fiction, because science fiction is really, it's not about science per se.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what society would be like if there were additional inventions or additional knowledge that we don't
Sure.
have yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I I I like writing about the actual science, what
Mm-hmm.
science can show us about the
Yeah.
world, what scientists are like. Uh, and so I did 3 books with that. One of them focusing on these proto-human ape-like beings, and the other 2 are what I like to call post-apocalyptic optimism.
Mm-hmm.
They're about, our civilization falls apart, and then that's actually kind of a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so my fourth continues the trend of me being interested in science. I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah.
But
You have a
I
background in
decided,
science, right?
yes,
Yeah.
I have a master's degree in
Yeah.
conservation biology and a
Mm-hmm.
lifetime of being a geek.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so
Guilty.
then that's why we get along.
I'm a nerd.
I once saw a Venn diagram, and one was nerds and geeks, and the overlap was layered. People who care about the distinction between nerds and geeks.
Again, absolutely true. Guilty as charged.
Um, so so this fourth one is it's high fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's so I tried to write within an established genre, but this is me, so it just sort of went off on its own thing. But
You went into like the dragons and the science behind how a dragon can fly and where the flames come from.
I actually have done that, just mentally daydreaming. I do think about how dragons can, I do that. No, there's a brief mention of there are dragons in this world,
Mm-hmm.
but they're mentioned only very briefly,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not that sort of dragon. The
Mm-hmm.
premise for this fantasy world is that there isn't any fantasy magic. There's
Mm-hmm.
some, unexplained phenomena and occult stuff and
Mm-hmm.
religious stuff.
Sure.
It's deliberately left unclear how much of the people's religion is them being wrong
Mm-hmm.
and how much is actually how the world works.
Yeah.
But it's, in many ways, it's sort of, it's not exactly planet Earth, but it works like Earth does.
Mm-hmm.
All the rules are the same.
Okay.
But in this world, see, in our world, there's this vast extinction that happened at the end of the ice ages.
Mm-hmm.
In their world, that didn't happen.
Okay.
So it's kind of their equivalent of the early Roman Empire. It's the
Mm-hmm.
Iron Age.
Okay.
And all of these Ice Age type animals, or rather their descendants, are still there.
Okay.
And they're the fantastic beasts. So what I did was I looked up what species Europe had
Mm-hmm.
during the Pleistocene that sounded like the fantastic beasts of myth. And that's what they're referred to. So I talk about a dragon, and it is a really big lizard, like a Komodo dragon, only not quite so big, but they're venomous.
Mm-hmm.
So if they bite you, it feels like you're being burnt, and the wound won't heal. So
Okay.
you're in serious trouble. You don't want to mess with them. There are griffins are important. They're a species of rhinoceros. Unicorns get a mention. They're another species of rhinoceros. Kelpies appear a couple of times. They're
Okay.
actually a species of hippopotamus.
Mhm.
I mean, Kelpies are water horses, is
Yeah.
what they refer to.
Yeah.
And people make them look like horses with streaming manes or whatever. But the word hippopotamus,
Mm-hmm.
it literally means river horse.
Yep. I knew that. It's one of those weird. So it's like one of those weird things that's stuck in your head. It's like the Latin term for giraffe is Camellias leopardius. Why do I know that? I don't really know. But it's stuck with me. It basically camel leopard because it has spots like a leopard and it looks got a long neck like a camel. Camellias leopardius. There's your Latin for the day. Whether you wanted it or not.
Oh, I like Latin. I'm always game for a little bit of Latin. Um, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to prove to, oh, and there are um, elves and dwarves. They are other hominid species.
So what is your central conflict in your world building? What are you? What's
Are
your
you
big
asking?
thing? Well, for
Are
your
you asking?
characters, really.
Um, okay, so now we're talking about the actual story. So
Hmm.
there's a setting,
Yes.
and there's a
World
story.
high fantasy is always big world building, which is why I avoid it because I'm just not that good at it, so I don't do it.
See, I'm not good at not doing it. When I was in
Mm.
grad school and I was too exhausted to form any coherent thought that was not associated with school, the part of my brain that does this sort of thing sort of went like this, and I invented this whole planet. It's not attached to any novel or story, but I just, I couldn't, I couldn't, I couldn't rein it in.
Yep. Yep.
But to answer your question about what the central conflict is, um, the equivalent of Rome, Nonane.
Okay.
This politically it's a republic, but they have conquered most of the continent already,
Hmm.
and obviously they're very militaristic.
Hmm.
as an empire, expanding the empire, and taking booty and slaves is central to the economy. So they need weapons. They need weapons and armor and gear, all of which is made out of steel. And to make steel, you need, I mean, like a lot of times we do it with coal, but they use charcoal.
Yeah.
So they need this vast amount of charcoal, and what they're doing is gradually deforesting the continent, which is putting a lot of these animals at risk of extinction. And it's specifically putting, we can call them dwarves, but that's not, in this world, that's not a polite word for them. The polite term for them is the Durger. The Durger people are, they're actually Neanderthals is what they are.
Okay.
But they have, their society is, their memory is better than ours. Their abstract thinking is worse. Okay. But their memory is better than ours. So their society is based on doing things correctly, basically exactly the same way every generation. They call this living in the music.
Okay.
And living in the music involves hunting very large animals. This is central. Hunting these large animals is central to their way of life. It's central to their culture. It's central to their survival as a people and as a species. And with deforestation happening, they're this small minority of people with no political power at all. And they're critically endangered. So this, among our species, they're called ubum. Among the ubum, this environmental justice movement develops, initially to save the Durger, but then there end up being other reasons. Peasants need access to forests for hunting and that sort of thing. But this environmental justice movement, and it gains traction and starts looking like it might actually change something. And the steel industry oligarchs go, no. So that ends up being the conflict, this civil war that breaks out over essentially land use policy. It's a two-part book. The first part is already published. That shows the lead up to the war, how the situation develops, why the situation develops, who the characters are. And then the second part, which actually it's getting a bit long. I realize I might end up having to divide it again, so it might be second and third. But anyway, the rest of the story is going to be about the war.
People like series. Yeah. So you started out writing a series, you just didn't know it.
Yeah. And this was going to be a one-off, but it.
Yeah. The characters get a vote. They always do.
Oh yeah. One of my characters did change something unexpected. One of my protagonists is transgender twice.
Okay.
Twice because in universe, this character is what we would call a trans man, although because of the culture in the story, she uses a feminine name and feminine pronouns because they don't think about these things the same way.
Yeah.
But we would call this person a trans man. But that wasn't my original idea for the character. I was picturing, sort of like a tomboy woman. And the character's like, nope.
No. That's not the way you're writing me. Like, okay. That does happen. Our imaginary friends do tell us what they want us to do, and then we have to morph from there, because if we don't morph, the storyline isn't genuine, and it's not going to read genuine, and it's just not going to work.
Right.
So did you do a lot of like pre-writing before you sat down to do this? Because there's a lot of elements, and I think with the animals and the worlds and the different people, I could see that easily sort of getting unwieldy after a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely go overboard with it. I do a lot more than I need to just because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm inventing this whole language. I don't need to do that for the book. I'm doing it anyway because I want to. I'm in, and like each culture has its
Mhm.
own cuisine, and
Mhm.
I've started developing recipes
Okay.
for the cultures in the book. Some of which are delicious, by the way. I can, if you have the capacity to include such a recipe in show notes, I can send you one. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
does the book need that? No. Do I need that? Somehow, yes. But a lot of this stuff, I didn't do it. I did only a little bit of it before starting writing at all. I did a lot of it sort of concurrently, and sometimes I'll develop something more about the world, and I'll have to go back and fix something earlier.
Yeah.
But I did a lot of research
Yeah.
because I often use real life models for
Mhm.
fictional characters.
Sure.
Now, in my previous books, the models were almost always people who are alive now. So I deliberately hid who they are because I don't want anybody, I don't want to violate the privacy of anybody I know. I don't want readers who may have heard of them to not be clear on what's fiction and what's not, and develop the wrong idea about the real people. So I've been very careful about that. But this time I've used almost entirely historical models,
Hmm.
people who are seriously famous.
Hmm.
So I don't need to worry about that. Like, no matter what I write about a character based on Abraham Lincoln, you're still I mean, that's not going to hurt or help Abraham Lincoln's,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. There. That is historical. That is out there. It is fact. You cannot change a person once they're dead.
Yes. And so my three protagonists are based loosely but solidly
Hmm.
on Abraham Lincoln, U.S. Grant, and William Tecumseh Sherman.
Okay.
And Sherman's the one who started about all of this. I read a book that mentioned him and
Hmm.
realized that this person I just sort of vaguely heard about before is actually like really fascinating.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
wanted to write a book about him. So I don't want to write a book about him and his friendship with Grant.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
and this is the result. And so I read everything I could about, especially Sherman
Hmm.
and Grant. I already knew a lot about Lincoln, but I
Yeah.
read some more on him as well.
Mhm.
So that was a major preparatory project.
That I read a book which I ended up giving it away. No, I sold it at a garage sale. But it was a very good biography um, of Doc Holliday.
Hmm.
Doc Holliday was a fascinating historical figure, um, and what was interesting is that the premise of the biographer did a really good job. He was saying essentially, um, Doc Holliday and his contemporaries from the OK Corral, they all knew in a time, and they had discussions, and you see it in their notes, that they understood this was the end of the West. They saw law enforcement and the world changing behind them from east to west, and they knew it was coming to an end.
Hmm.
And it sort of so my point being, those historical books really do change the way we look at some historical figures. In I think we have a mythology that we're sold in school, um, that may or may not be accurate. It's only, but I mean, your elementary school only has a certain amount of time to tell you about Lincoln. Um, but when you get older, you start to realize that the depth to these people, and it informs your character growth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's especially true of Sherman, because a lot of what, the sort of most people, if they know like 2 minutes worth of information about
Hmm.
Sherman,
Yeah.
what they actually know is Confederate propaganda. Uh,
Probably
and
not.
and some Union propaganda too,
Mhm.
honestly. But it's propaganda. It doesn't have really anything to do with who he was. Um, and yeah, if people read Gwen, who is, as I said, not only transgender, but she's also half an elf, so half elfin. So if people read about this transgender half elf and decide she's really cool, and then they go start reading about Sherman
Mhm.
and find out who he really was,
Mhm.
I would be very happy about that.
Mhm. You know what? I think that's a very admirable point. I don't think we consider where our work could take people at the end of the day. Um, yeah. So so what you've always got your world building aspect, and I always go back to Magic Kingdom for Sale, that first episode where you see Landover for the first time. That to me is really good world building. Um, but character wise,
Mhm.
was there, um, when you were working out the characters? Now you've got relationships between animals and the characters in some way, shape, or form. How did you handle kind of that technical aspect of writing? Because I think a lot of times, um, we're on the cusp of using things as set pieces that we shouldn't be using as set pieces because they're actually part of the storyline.
I don't really understand the question.
So if I were to write a story and I were to include my dog, there is a relationship between human and dog that you're trying to put on the written page. Is there that same relationship between the characters in your story and the animals? Because you've got this incredible zoology that you've come up with. How do you handle kind of the interface between those two different dynamics? Because I'm assuming the animals don't talk.
Right. Um, yeah, they don't. Although there is one scene in the part that hasn't been published yet where an animal doesn't speak English, certainly.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be English anyway, it would be
Yeah.
Atarish. But it doesn't speak a human language.
Hmm.
But it a really good argument could be made that the Oliphant, does talk. Now, Oliphants are, yeah, I borrowed the word from Tolkien, but it's applied to a species that is usually referred to as the straight-tusked elephant. They
Okay.
were huge. They were significantly bigger than modern African elephants are, like up to 14 feet high at the shoulder. It's huge animals. Anyway, so in this world, the military has elephant cavalry as well as horse cavalry. And there's this one scene where Gwen needs to get a message to someone else who is captive and
Hmm.
has elephants with him also. So she asks one of her elephants to give the message, because modern elephants, and I assume these guys as well, can communicate across very long distances using
like a subsonic thing, yeah.
Yeah, subsonic, very low pitched sound. So she asks him to do this, and she doesn't know whether he has any idea what she's talking about or whatever. She's kind of hoping that the elephants who are trapped in there with her friend will at least like be able to smell that he's out there or something and do something. But what actually happens, it does look very much like he told them. But did he? And that's left unclear. Writing those relationships, I guess, hasn't been difficult for me because I never think of animals or plants as just set pieces.
Sure.
They aren't that to begin with. I mean, sometimes I might be considering them at a distance, or I might not be like, I'm not going to fully develop the character of every tree my characters pass on the road.
Right.
But if I mention an individual, it's an individual. And yes, in some cases that includes trees. In some cases, it includes, in this story, it includes stones and wells, and because the humans at least have a very animist mindset. So when you go to get water, you have to greet the soul of the well or the spring, which is called a naiad. You have to greet the naiad and just be polite, and that's very important to them.
I think that's interesting because you've built in a very there's layers to the storyline, and that always fascinates me because in horror and mystery and the kind of sci-fi that I write, I don't think we have those layers because it's so dialogue driven. And the layers that you get with that high fantasy, I think it creates a depth that you just don't see in other places. That's why people love high fantasy. So who are your inspirations? You mentioned Tolkien.
For this particular work, Tolkien is a fiction author I'm drawing the most from, both because I like Tolkien and am familiar with that world, so it's easy for me to sort of bounce off of it, and also because I'm aware that Tolkien is so incredibly popular.
Oh yeah.
So if I say, I mean, the title of this is The Elf, the Dwarf, and the Telegraph, and I chose that title with Tolkien in mind so that people who are familiar with his world would sort of mentally have that starting place. Like, oh, okay, we're going back to Middle Earth, except there's a telegraph? We're not going, this is not Middle Earth, but I am using these words and these names in order to evoke it. So yeah, he's big. In terms of my writing style, I draw heavily from Ursula K. Le Guin. What would Le Guin do is my question as a writer. One of the reviewers that this book now has on Amazon actually compared the book to Le Guin. It's like, I don't need to touch the ground for the rest of the week. This is amazing. So she's very big in that sense. Hemingway also, although I don't think of him as as actively as I do of Le Guin.
So what was it about Le Guin's writing that has sort of captivated you?
It's really good.
Fair enough.
I just, there was like a decade when I read A Wizard of Earthsea every year. And my goal is to one day read everything that she's written, everything that she's published, with one exception. Her book Lathe of Heaven. I've started reading it twice. I've given up both times because it freaked me out. I do not like being existentially terrified. It's not fun. It's not my thing. I don't intend to try that book again. But other than that, I want to read everything of hers. I don't know. She's good. I see that. It's like, yes, I want to be able to do that.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, of course, with this book, I mean, Sherman is a major.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all three of them, but him especially. And yeah, I've read his memoir.
Mm-hmm.
I've read a collection of his letters.
Mm-hmm.
I've read some of the books that I've read include detailed descriptions of things that he did, like somebody wrote down specific scenes, sometimes dialogue that how he spoke and what he did and what he did for fun and all of this stuff. And I'm drawing heavily from that as well. And he was an amazing writer.
Hmm.
So
No, I dig it. That's really, really cool. We talked about you started writing a book that became maybe two, maybe three.
actually maybe four. No matter how many books the story takes place, there's eventually going to be an additional book with the excessive world building. So, the recipes, the language, the geological history.
Mm-hmm. What's the so one of the things that I think I often struggle with is the idea of we say we know when a book is done. As a writer, we hit that point and we go, okay, we're done. That's it. That's the end. That's the ending point. The characters have told me that. We're done. Cut, print, move on. How are you, is there a point where you're looking at your work in progress and going, no, it needs to cut off here and I need to make these two books, but they need to be connected. How did you reach that decision? Word count, no.
And that's part of it.
Yeah.
Well, the story has a sort of a rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
There are major turning points in the story, like the point where the story goes from leading up to a civil war to actually being in one. That's a huge shift, both in terms of, for the obvious reasons, like war makes things different, and because two of my characters are soldiers. So it goes from, they're at home with their wives and children and trying to figure out how to, they're not at that point when the war breaks out, they're civilians, although they previously were not. And trying to figure out how to get employed and dealing with their parents and their in-laws and just all of the civilian stuff that we're familiar with. And then they're figuring out how to fight battles, how to deal with commanding officers, how to deal with, these people who aren't doing what they're supposed to do and how to get the right supplies and all of this stuff. So the major concern, I mean, still thinking about their wives and children, but the major central concern, the focus of the main characters shifts suddenly. So that was a natural place to do it. And if I divide it again, I don't want to try to figure out how to put this without there's a point in the remainder of the story where things darken. Where I mean, it's a war. There's always a dark element. I'm not trying to glamorize
Yeah,
war.
war is a dark and detestable thing.
Yeah, as Sherman very much agreed
Yeah.
with. He's famous for saying war is hell.
Mm-hmm.
And and but there's a number of chapters where it really seems like everything's sort of unambiguously going well for the main characters.
Mm-hmm.
Things are difficult, but they're making progress towards their goals, and um, it sort of looks like it's building towards, your classic happy ending. The bad guys are going to be defeated, and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And then something happens, and then from that point on, it's much less clear.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more ambiguity
Okay.
about what's going on, what's going to happen. So that's another shift. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if I do another break, that's going to be where I put it.
I think it's always fascinating when somebody sets out to write a book and then it ends up going and going and getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and the decision process is, all things writing is always about the actual steps in writing. How do you produce a book? How do you do? And so I think the mechanics are always fascinating to me. Have For some reason, I want to say you have told me before that you kind of have always been a writer. You've always had that writer bug in you. Um,
Yes.
do you find that things you wrote early on influence this work?
I'm not sure whether it's the things I wrote early on influenced the work, or the things that influenced the early work are also influencing this. I don't know which
Mm,
way the causality goes.
okay.
But yeah, um, there are definitely commonalities. Um, the first time I tried to write a novel as a teenager, uh, the protagonists were a best friend pair, one of whom was a political leader prone to depression,
Mhm.
and the other was a scientist and a teacher who was basically an elf. Um, and now I have three protagonists. One of them is a political leader prone to depression. One of them, he's a soldier. He will become a political leader, although
Mhm.
that's after the book ends. But
Okay.
I mean, he's based on Grant. We know he's going to
Mhm.
do this.
Sure.
He is also prone to depression, and his best friend is an elf, who's also a serious geek. So, the same things
Concepts, same
happen.
ideas. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh. Well, I mean, I think I always like to say we're the sum of our parts, right? We're the pieces, we're the books we've read, we're the movies we've watched, we're the pictures we looked at. Got me to thinking about during COVID, I was reading a lot of different books, and I was actually concentrating on leadership books. And I found a leadership philosophies of General Lee.
Mm.
And it was actually he actually did write quite a bit after when he became president of the university. He wrote quite a bit about that topic, and it's interesting to see what people think about like post war, post those things that kind of made them famous. Um, and I think that feeds into our greater thinking. So you mentioned the possibility of a fourth book.
Mhm.
What made you decide you wanted to do that? I know you mentioned it briefly, but I wanted to circle back to that. Was there something in the storyline you're like, you know what, we really need to hit on this?
Um, well, the fourth book would be the one um, with the additional world building stuff.
Mm.
So, there's going to be 2 or 3 books covering the story and then the additional world building stuff.
Okay.
And I want to share that. I mean, I don't need to share it if nobody ever knows this stuff but me and my friends and family. That's fine.
Mhm.
But I figure other people might be interested. You might want to, because I'm not the only geek out there. I'm not the only person
No.
who reads something like, well, how does that work? How is that possible? There's this mention here of a dragon. What is that? Well, there's a book that I have a book for you that you can, or I will anyway, that you can
Yeah.
look up,
Mm.
or the actual recipe for Itarish wedding stew, which is, by the way, delicious. Um, uh, Geology, the language. There's a couple of Itarish words scattered in the book, but there's no block of text. It's very minimal. But a lot of people are really interested in constructed
Yeah.
languages, and
Oh yeah.
I have.
Mm.
I read recently, like, sort of word counts, like vocabulary sizes for various um, existing conlangs, including Tolkien's.
Mhm.
And mine is actually one of the largest in existence now.
Hmm.
I have over 3,000 words.
A lot of
And
words.
yeah, and apparently it's very rare for
Mm.
conlangs to develop vocabularies this large.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't, I didn't,
So you never passed a rabbit hole you didn't want to go down, huh?
no.
I love it. I love it. So the most important question I ever ask on all things writing: where can people find this latest work?
Well, the simplest way to find any and all of my work is to uh, do an online search on my name, because I'm the only Caroline Ailanthus in the world. So it makes a great search term. If you forget everything else about how to find my work, remember my name and you can find it.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, um, you can get things through my publisher, Saltwater Media.
Okay.
I'm on Amazon. Now, I support independent bookstores and
Mhm.
all of that.
Sure.
If you can get them from somewhere other than Amazon, that's really better. And you can go to your local independent bookstore and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, can you order this for me? You can go to your library. Hey, can you get this?
Sure.
Uh, um, it's going to be on basically all online sellers.
Okay.
If
Well,
you got to
I'm
read on it, is there.
I'm going to drop a link, drop a QR code at the end of this recording, so people can go to it, find you online. But you're right. If you just search your name, it'll magically just pop up. It's a great. It's the last name.
Mm-hmm.
It's perfect. It grabs you. It grabs you. So I was just going to add one other thing. You talked about kind of there's myth and mythology and that kind of thing that we build into these worlds. My wife and I went to Crete recently, and we spent like 10 days in Crete, wandering around and looking at Ionian ruins, and there's early Christian, there's Roman, there's you name it, it's kind of there on Crete. But these things feed they feed our creativity.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's almost the theme of this show, I think. Feed your creativity. Give it more to chew on. Well, Caroline, it's always been a pleasure. All things writing, people, folks watching the show, go and check out her work. Like I said, I'm going to put a link at the end of the show.
That QR code will get you to the website. But really, she's very easy to find online. It's easy. It's way easier than even me because yeah. So, on behalf of All Things Writing, I am Brian the Writer, and my wonderful guest Caroline. Caroline, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure. Like I said, I love having repeat people. It's great fun. So on behalf of All Things Writing, this is Brian the Writer and Caroline signing off.
This has been another amazing episode of All Things Writing. If you heard something that got your wheels spinning, check out the links in the show notes. Also, please follow the show and remember to leave those reviews. Those simple acts of kindness mean the world to us. Hop on over to briannowak.com, and that is Brian with a Y, and check out my latest novels. I'm on Amazon or wherever you buy your ebooks. And as a reminder, the music you heard on the show today was used under license from the artist Ryan Ancona. Thanks for listening to the show and have a blessed day.